Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UVA Medical Center Hour. I'm Justin Mutter, Director of the Medical Center Hour, which is a program of our Center for Health, Humanities, and Ethics here at the University of Virginia. Today's event marks over 2 decades of collaboration with the Koppaka Family Foundation, with an emphasis on fostering humanism in healthcare through provider-patient relationships. In honor of Dr. Koppaka Rao, a professor of pharmacy, who, as his children wrote in Annals of Internal Medicine following his untimely death, possessed a lifelong love for teaching and learning, the Koppaka Family Foundation Lecture in the Health Humanities offers us an opportunity to come together and think carefully and critically about how we talk to one another in the world of medicine. Today's speakers, in sharing the language of ALS, will help us do just that. So a brief word about today's Zoom-only event. Dr. Plews-Ogan and Bedlack will welcome extended conversation through Q&A toward the end of our hour together. When the time comes for our Zoom audience to enter questions, please enter those questions into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please also note that continuing education credit can be claimed for your participation, and we invite you to follow the directions on the slides that will appear again at the end of our hour in order to claim your CE. Illnesses have always been used as metaphors, as Susan Sontag reminded us many years ago. As we navigate the sometimes rigid, but oftentimes liminal space between the kingdom of wellness and the kingdom of illness, our experiences with illness are inevitably molded by and with our language. All too rarely do we take the opportunity to explore those languages, either with welcome or with critique. Today, we're privileged to have 2 extraordinary physicians who will take us on an exploration of the language of ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, often more commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Dr. Jim Plews-Ogan is Associate Professor Emeritus in the UVA Department of Pediatrics, a physician who has had an extraordinary career in caring for children living with complex and advanced illness. After starting his career in nursing, his clinical career has spanned over 40 years, including building an innovative local pediatric house calls program, global health interprofessional training and development, and leading regional clinical practice quality networks, among many other highlights. He retired in March 2022 due to a diagnosis of ALS, and in addition to starting a fund which is committed to ALS advocacy and awareness, he has developed a beautiful blog called Offering Kindness. Dr. Richard Bedlack is the professor of neurology at Duke, where he also serves as the director of the Duke ALS Clinic. A prolific clinician, teacher, researcher, and patient advocate, he has published over 100 articles on ALS and has received many awards for his service over his career, including the American Academy of Neurology's Patient Advocacy Award. He is the leader of the International ALS Untangled program, which utilizes social networking to investigate alternative and off-label treatment options for patients living with ALS. And he's also a leader of the ALS Reversals program, which attempts to understand why some people with ALS recover from it and to make this happen more often. Drs. Plews-Ogan and Bedlack, a warm welcome to our Medical Center Hour stage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. And thank you, Dr. Bedlack. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today with you. May I say, you are a rock star in the ALS community. We are truly grateful for your years of scientific ALS research and participation in the Healy trials, for launching ALS Untangled, which is an invaluable daily resource to patients and clinicians, and for your pioneering work on ALS reversals. But there's more. I know several of your patients. They describe you as an excellent listener, a fountain of information, a great communicator, and maybe most importantly, a source of hope for them. I also see you on all the webinars and advocacy panels and before the FDA to add the patients and clinicians' perspective. I have been inspired by your language many times, which brings us to today. As I became an ALS patient, I often found it perplexing to describe what I was experiencing. For example, my symptoms did not always match the medically related terms I had learned to elicit from my patients. When asked to describe what I was feeling as an ALS patient, I said, buzzing. And the doctors responded, do you mean numbness and tingling? No, I'd say, it's buzzing. We'd look at each other and shrug. And then I'd say, half joking, this is my first time having ALS, and I'm just trying to call it as I see it. Likewise, the emotional and spiritual experience, I lacked language that felt immediately authentic. I was not at all clear on my feelings from day to day. I had no elevator speech prepared in response to, oh my God, Jim, I just heard you have ALS. What are you going to do? Or the plain and simple, Jim, how are you doing? And let's just say that receiving a diagnosis of ALS is an existential challenge for which I had inadequate language. When my patients learned that I would be closing my solo private practice, they were sad. When they learned it was related to the diagnosis of ALS, their grief became magnified. Many of my patients wanted to stay in touch and suggested I write a blog. So I did. The blog is called Offering Kindness, and it became a way for me to generate language by telling stories. One way to describe the blog is that I'm using narrative nonfiction to share my story of life with ALS. Another way to see it is that in telling my story, I begin to understand my story. And yet another way to reflect on the writing is that I have found a creative way to give expression to a major transformation in my life. I have found a way to give language to my new world. So today, Dr. Bedlack and I hope to share the ways in which patients and clinicians give language to each other in the land of ALS. And moreover, why and how it matters. The plan here is for me to read 3 essays from my blog. Each essay comes from a different place along my journey. Then Dr. Bedlack and I will reflect on the themes and the language that emerge from each essay. The first essay is called Introducing Lefty and Righty, and it was posted April 8th, 2022, 10 months ago. Introducing Lefty and Righty. It's time to introduce you to the story of Lefty and Righty. The year is 1956. The place is the sweet womb of one Bernice Jean Galbraith-Ogan, a 27-year-old teacher in Lorain, Ohio. You'll remember Lorain for its famous polluted Black River that flamed its way into the national news. I would also like you to know that Lorain is the birthplace of Nobel laureate Toni Morrison and actress Melissa Govich. No doubt you'll remember Melissa from her roles on television and Broadway, and famously as Ansel Elgort's mom in the blockbuster movie, The Fault of Our Stars, in Our Stars. But back to the womb. You see, Lefty and Righty are fraternal twins. They've been a duo from the very beginning. At 7 months, they were passing banana bits to each other for fun. The twins have always been happy to work and play together, climbing trees, riding bikes, eating a field fresh ear of hot buttered corn at a picnic in July. These two go way back with fun and festivity. Bernie, as she was known to her friends, loved Lefty and Righty equally. She clipped their nails with great care and inspected for cleanliness before meals. She had taught them to move a chess piece and to shoot pool on a revered table in Mr. Ryan's basement. She eventually gave up anything that involved hand-eye coordination, but to be fair, that was not the fault of either Lefty or Righty. Bernie and her father before her were known for being left-handed. So when Lefty preferred to hold the spoon, then the Crayola, I suspect that Bernie was silently well pleased. Lefty emerged as the one with notable dexterity at any keyboard. His baseline on a Hammond B3 could astonish, and his speed with ASDF was truly remarkable. Righty worked to keep up, with above average success and remain content with JKL semicolon. Lefty couldn't help feeling the tiniest bit sad for righty regarding the semicolon. Let's keep this next part to ourselves, since now is not the time to reflect on past failures. The truth is that lefty could be a bit of a show-off. For example, the repeated errors in typing class were due to lefty's competitive edge to exceed 50 words per minute. Lefty has always been the one who needs to be convinced to slow down. As life for the twins poured forth, Lefty would emerge as the favorite one. Lefty wears the ring. Lefty pens the letters. Lefty strokes the hair of children at bedtime. Lefty uses the fork and chops the onions. Until recently, Lefty's index finger pushed seeds into the fresh, cool soil each spring. A year ago, Lefty held Bernie's left hand as she lay dying. Lefty has led a life of privilege, and righty has been, well, right there, ready to help. Righty held the onion to be chopped. Righty held equal number of children's hands to cross a parking lot. Righty happily joined in push-ups and swimming across Walden Pond. Righty has always been grateful to tag along with Lefty, who has always happily taken the lead. If the symptoms of ALS had started with righty instead of lefty, the diagnosis may have been longer in the making. Slight weakness in righty's thumb and index finger may not have manifest as a problem, like it did for lefty trying to write clinic notes and prepare vaccines in syringes. Dysdiadokinesis is the medical term for the inability to perform rapid alternating muscle movements. It is a hallmark of ALS, along with muscle weakness and fasciculations, which are muscle twitching. The clinician tests for dysdiadokinesis by comparing the right and left hands. The examiner asks the patient to wiggle their fingers and tap the fingers against the thumb of the same hand in rapid succession. Lefty, of course, has always excelled at this task, so much so that a doctor has worried more about righty. That is, until I reveal Lefty's privileged place in the world. ALS doctors who had never met Lefty and righty were reassured by Lefty's lack of dysdiadokinesis. But I knew. Lefty knew. So did righty. We kept quiet for a while. After all, what was there to do? In an unassuming way, righty has learned to button a shirt, to brush my teeth and shave my face. Lefty was downhearted at first, maybe still is, but Lefty is also grateful for righty, who has never been one to brag about brushing teeth or pushing the start button on a microwave. What has become clear to me as ALS progresses is that righty and lefty are in this together. Righty is quite happy to hand lefty the pen that would otherwise slip away from lefty's loose grip. And lefty, God love lefty, is honestly growing more comfortable receiving the help, because it means the two are still in this as a team, even if some of their roles are shifting. For now, as lefty's function declines, righty is there for assistance and comfort. I've noticed lefty settling into righty's palm or lacing fingers as a way to settle into my lap, like the way Peggy and I spoon to sleep night after night. It's an act of ordinary tenderness. It's an unconscious kindness. It's love manifest in the reality of ALS. Rick?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I mean, I love your entire blog, but I have to say that's probably my favorite of all your entries. And, you know, it's made me think of so many things. I'll make a few comments and then I've got some questions for you. But first thing I thought of is, you know, this Grand Rounds is about words. And I think there's words that are spoken and there's words that are heard. And those two things are not always the same. And this reminded me of how grateful I am to have evolved in my listening style over the past 23 years and 4,000 patients and families cared for with ALS. I've gone from what I would call a diagnostic or prescriptive listening style that I cultivated in medical school, internship, and residency to one that I would now describe as more of an empathetic one. So just to give you some examples, when I first started my career, I would have been one of the ones trying to change your buzzing word to something that fit my understanding of a specific symptom, twitching or tingling or, numbness. And I would have missed the best parts of your blog entry. I would have come away with middle-aged white male, previously healthy, had gradual onset of left-hand clumsiness and weakness, which gradually progressed. And then I would have switched to a somewhat generic speech about your differential diagnosis and my plan for working through it and your treatment options. And thankfully now I can appreciate not just the facts of your medical history that are in there, but more importantly, the human being that shines through behind it all. I can see from just that one entry how intelligent, creative, and funny you are, how much you admire your family, your enjoyments of exercise, of cooking, of gardening. And, understanding these parts of you would help me personalize my discussions about your disease, as well as the ways that we could work together to cultivate, preserve, and maybe even strengthen those parts of you. I mean, that's something it took me a long time to realize, being able to reverse what's happening on the outside to a person with ALS, but there's a lot I can do to help people recognize those great qualities that everyone has and to preserve and strengthen those. And it's really amazing when that happens. I mean, I'll tell you a short story of my own. I had a patient some years back who asked me to come on to an NPR interview with her in case there was any science questions. That's what she said. I want you to be there in case there's any science questions. Okay. So I'm sitting there and she's being interviewed, and the DJ says, take me back to the day you were diagnosed by Bedlack with ALS. What was your life like? And, what were the symptoms that you were having? And she said, oh, I was on top of the world. I had become the vice president of my company and I was flying all over the world. I had all these 100 people working for me. And all I had was a foot drop on one side. And I couldn't believe that this guy was telling me that this is what I had and that this was going to change all the stuff that I had worked so hard for. And the DJ said, well, what about the rest of your life? Like, do you have a family? Do you have any hobbies? And she said, well, that wasn't so great. My husband and I were separated. I hardly saw my kids. I used to be very religious and I had kind of lost my faith. And he said, okay, well, now I can see that you're in a wheelchair. So tell me what your life is like now. And she said, yeah, I can't move my legs anymore. And I need help, with dressing and feeding. But man, my life is so much better now. Like, my husband and I are back together. We're living together. Our relationship's never been better. Every night, the whole family gathers around for dinner. We put away all of our electronic devices and we have a great conversation. I'm back going to church every week. I'm even doing some mission work virtually with my church. And she said, my life is so much better now that if Bedlack had a pill that would take away my ALS, but make it the way it used to be, I wouldn't take it. I mean, the tears just started flowing. They still do. I still tear up, when I think about that comment, because I was just so blown away by it. Just changed my whole way of thinking about, what I can do as a clinician and to who and what parts of them do they like the most. So those are my comments. And, some of my questions, one was along the lines of that patient's story. Were you always a writer? Because obviously you're very gifted, or is this something that you gave up when you tried to work really hard and do your residency and become a physician and take care of your patients? Did you give it up for a while and then come back to it?
Yeah. Writing, I've always enjoyed writing. And since having ALS, I've had the opportunity to kind of work on it a little bit more. But as you mentioned, as life got really busy, actually the busiest right before I got ALS, or was diagnosed with ALS, there was no time for writing or much creative at all, frankly. But I'm glad to have it back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, another thing that struck me is you really seem to pride yourself on being a lefty. like your ancestors were. And, when the disease hit that part of your body first, how much did the loss of your left hand affect your self-esteem, your concept of who you are?
It's a great question, and thank you for asking. It was really a deep loss that was hard to put into words, frankly. It seemed like such a hit, that it would come, this tragic diagnosis would come into that left hand that I really, as I explained in the blog, had gotten quite fond of and happy about being a lefty. So it was hard to put that into words. And I tried sometimes, to say, well, yeah, and I'm left-handed. And people sort of got it, they were like, oh, wow, that sucks. And I'm like, yeah, it really does. But it was really hard to put the depth of that, the history of it, et cetera. Like I had the opportunity to express in that writing that was really a part of it.
Well, I mean, I have to say, I came away incredibly impressed with your ability to focus on what you do have, righty, and not what you don't. And I mean, I've come to realize this is not an easy thing, especially for people who are early in the course of ALS. They're usually having so much grief about their existing losses, but maybe even more of what I call anticipatory grief about the ones that might come later. And I think it's remarkable to find someone early in the course of this who is able to live in the moment. It's something I try to encourage my patients to do. I try to encourage them to participate, organize events that celebrate, who they are, what their spirit and what they have. And these events can also be used to raise awareness and funds for research. And you've been doing that through Hummingbird. And I have to say, on a personal level, I've gotten to attend these events. I try to be present for them and support them, not just with words, but by being there. And amazing what it's led me to. I mean, I never dreamed that these kinds of events would lead me to play in the World Series of Poker, to golf on some of the best courses in the world, to climb and descend into a volcano in Iceland, to have suits made by some of the world's greatest tailors, even to walk on the runway at Men's Fashion Week in Paris. And they've actually come full circle and helped me to recognize and grow the best parts of who I am. I think my favorite things about myself are my creativity and open-mindedness. And I've been able to pay those forward and use those to build programs like the ones you mentioned, ALS Untangled and ALS Reversals, that I think a lot of people are benefiting from.
Yeah, they are. And we're so grateful for those in the ALS community. Let's move on to the next reading. And I'd like you to set that up briefly with just a few words about what the ALS FRS is.
Sure. Yeah, so the ALS Functional Rating Scale, and we use the revised version now, it's abbreviated ALS FRS-R. It's the main outcome measure that we use to follow ALS progression, both in clinical trials, but also in our clinics. And so it's a survey. It consists of 12 questions that we ask patients. Each question pertains to a different body function that can be affected by ALS. And each question is scored between a 4, which is totally normal, and a 0, which means that function is totally gone. So a healthy person would score a 48, and someone who's lost everything would score a 0. And Jim, there are some nice things about this scale. I know it's taken a beating in recent years on social media and things like that, but there are some nice things about it. It has obvious face validity. All the 12 questions pertain to things that really do seem to be important to people living with ALS. If we look at a large population of patients, the average rate of decline is about a point per month. And that helps us in clinic answer the question, how am I doing compared to the average patient? Researchers have come to agree on what a clinically meaningful change in this is. It's probably a 25% slowing in the rate of decline. And in the past 5 years, that degree of slowing has resulted in 2 new FDA-approved drugs. But of course, there's also a lot of real problems with it. It's not sensitive or specific to the loss of motor neurons that's occurring in a person with ALS. I've had many patients come to clinic and say, I'm definitely worse, and yet the score is exactly the same as it was last time. And also it can dramatically change just based on something that I do in clinic. There's a couple of items on there that are responsive to symptomatic therapy. Like there's an item about sialorrhea, drooling. A person comes to me and they're drooling profusely and they have to have a towel under their mouth at all times. I can give them an anticholinergic and call them back an hour later, and their score might be 10% better because I've taken that item, from a 0 to a 3 or a 4.
Right.
And it's also got some psychometric issues. A 1-point change on a particular item can mean a vastly different thing than a 1-point change on another. Like if you look at the walking question, going from a 2 means you can walk with a brace. A 1 means you're wheelchair bound. That's a huge change in someone's life. And yet, if we look at that sialorrhea scale, going from a 4, no drooling at all, to a 3, I have a little bit of drooling at night, but none during the day. Most people would say, it's not that big of a deal. And, finally, it doesn't really capture the effects of the disease on what I think are some of the most important parts of a person, the things we talked about before, their spirit, their soul. And I think that's what your blog is going to show us.
Thank you. So the second reading is called ALS TLS instead of FRS TLS. And it was posted September 2nd, 2022, 5 months ago. And before I read it, it's important to note that the Plews-Ogan family has become intentionally turbocharged since I was diagnosed with ALS. ALS TLS. ALS is always a grim tale to tell and to hear. Sorry. What if we could tell a parallel ALS tale that was the opposite of grim? I have an idea. Listen on. ALS, Amyotrophic Lateral Sclerosis, is generally defined as a progressive neurodegenerative illness with no cure. Often, this straightforward definition is embellished with a clause or two, eventually leading to the inability to walk, talk, swallow, or breathe, including complete paralysis with intact cognition, being 100% fatal with an average life expectancy of 2 to 5 years. ALS is commonly referred to as a brutal disease, the disease most feared by doctors. As I mentioned, it's a grim tale. Sorry, again. Did you know that the functional decline that accompanies ALS is scored as a way of tracking the progression of ALS? There is a 12-item functional rating scale called the ALS FRSR. 48 points equals A+, no disability. Speech, salivation, swallowing, handwriting, using utensils, dressing and hygiene, turning in bed, walking, climbing stairs, dyspnea, which is breathing hard with activity, orthopnea, which is difficulty breathing while lying down, and respiratory insufficiency. I am currently a 43 or 44. I was a 41 or 42 until I taught righty to use a pen. Honestly, I could probably be a solid 44 if I used a rocker knife. After all, if we can enhance or adapt function to increase inclusion and participation, we diminish the disability. It is worth noting here that Mr. ALS's march toward disability does not necessarily include mental, emotional, or spiritual decline. ALS causes motor nerves and muscles to die. The thinking mind remains completely intact. Spirit, drive, passion, motivation, personality, and the ability to give and receive love all remain in full force. Let us remember that intact abilities often compensate for innate or acquired disability. People who are blind develop an exquisite sense of touch, smell, and hearing. Kids with spina bifida who have never had use of their legs learn to scoot around as fast as their playmates and siblings. What lefty is losing in function, righty happily takes on with aplomb. Joining the ALS community through organizations like I Am ALS, I am inspired by a fierceness of spirit, a courageous drive for change, a passionate desire to leave the world a better place. These ALS champions and their loved ones are my new team. Everyone is welcome. Everyone gets into the game. Kindness is not a zero-sum proposition. Love abounds. Courage and hope prevail. I understand the need for the ALS FRSR, but wouldn't it be great to have a partnered scale to measure positive progress? We could call it the ALS TLS, the ALS turbocharged living scale, measuring adaptability, humor, kindness, compassion, hopefulness, resilience, altruism, passion for creating change, fierceness and drive, advocacy for self and others, ingenuity, vision and meaning. What do you think? Great idea?
Yeah, brilliant, Jim. And I think it's just another way of looking at the theme that we talked about in the last segment about the difference between what's happening on the outside of someone versus, what's happening spiritually or to their soul. I mean, right now, we still can't fix what's happening on the outside, but there's certainly a lot that we can do to help people understand the best parts and grow those. And it just reminded me of another story illustrating really sort of the mismatch between what that ALS FRSR score measures and what your new measure might do. It's something I saw early in my career when I was really trying to learn everything I could about the science of ALS, what things I'm supposed to be measuring and, what the different measurements meant in terms of conversations that would have to be rolled out about evidence-based interventions like non-invasive ventilation and feeding tubes. And I came across this young man, he was in his early 20s, walked into the room. I was struck because he was not only the youngest person I'd seen to that point, but he was surrounded by just the wildest looking group. They look like they're on their way to a punk rock concert, mohawks, piercings, tattoos. And as I talked to him for a while, I realized that most of them had the same tattoo. They had a tattoo of a black swallow. The patient had an entire sleeve of them, and everybody in the room had at least one somewhere on their body. And so when we finished talking about the disease and the treatment options, I asked about the swallows. And he said, well, as I told you, ALS runs in my family. I didn't really get to know my mom. She died of ALS when I was really young, but she left me a book. And on every page of the book, she had drawn one black swallow. I don't know why. But when I got to be old enough, I asked my dad if I could get those tattoos. So at 16, I got an entire sleeve of swallows. Every swallow from the book is on my arm to remember my mom. And then when I got sick, everybody said, what can we do? How can we help? And he said, let's create an often awesome army to help me through this. And so they all got one swallow tattooed from his arm on their bodies. And they pledged to come to clinic as an army and to keep it positive and hopeful. And they did. And it was amazing. I mean, as that guy progressed, his ALS FRSR score dropped eventually very close to 0. And yet, his spirit, his sense of humor, his creativity, they flourished. I mean, there's still a series of videos about him and his army that are on YouTube called the Often Awesome Army. And I was so impressed with this lesson they taught me about cultivating, that spirit, that hope, using hope to help people through this disease, that I decided to get one of these swallow tattoos myself. So near the end of his life, I went to see him and I said, I've done some reading about this. I wanted to make sure it didn't have some hidden meaning that would get me fired from Duke. And it's kind of cool. It turns out that swallows are very old tattoos that sailors used to get, because for them, it was the first bird they would see when land was approaching, and it meant they weren't lost at sea. So I told him I got it right here, because the last thing I used to do before EMRs was sign the chart, and this would pop out of my sleeve. And it would remind me, no matter how many other evidence-based interventions I talked about that day, the most important thing I had to do for everyone was say something hopeful, because not everyone has an army like that. Sometimes I got to be their army. And I would say if we used, your scale on him, it would have actually gone up as the ALS FRSR went down.
Thank you so much for that story. That is really beautiful. I'm sure you have dozens of those stories, but thanks for sharing that one. All right. let's move on to the last reading, and then we can sum up here. This is really great. Thank you so much for doing this. This is really terrific. All right, so the last reading was posted September 6, 2022, and it describes a lesson about integrating ALS into life, into my new life. And it's called Holy Tears. It begins with a poem. Holy tears. Tender, soothing rain all night last night lingers into morning like sweet tears to begin this day anew and whole. I did not grow up in a culture of sweet tears, the kind that flow gently down the cheek as plainly and innocently as a smirk might linger while contemplating someone's clever retort. In truth, I learned to withhold smirks and tears at all cost until I became a dad. Dad tears are sweet tears. Dad tears are holy tears. I rarely withhold tears anymore. Last week, I found myself in Howard Goodkin's office with Peggy and my son, William. Howard is the chair of neurology at the University of Virginia. He is also a child neurologist with whom I have shared many complicated patients. Howard invited us to join him and the leaders of the ALS DART Center of Excellence to explore the possibility of a partnership with our new Hummingbird Fund. It is worth mentioning here that Howard is also the person I emailed when Peggy and I first seriously suspected a diagnosis of ALS. We were lost, adrift, so I emailed Howard. He called my cell before I could get up from the computer. A couple months later, at the Hummingbird launch, Howard joined a dozen colleagues, friends, and family as a docent, mingling with guests wearing his docent's badge that read, "Ask me anything." He was terrific. All of this history sat silently in the back of my mind as I calmly entered Howard's office and took a seat at the familiar long oak table, much like I had done many times before while working at UVA. We began with introductions and roles, going around the table, ending with me. As I began to recount my diagnosis and the journey which has led to the Hummingbird Fund, tears began to roll down my cheeks. I was surprised by the tears, and I smiled at Howard, who was sitting at the other end of the table. I said, "Well, Howard, this is the first time I've cried in your office." Everyone chuckled quietly, and without missing a beat, Howard said, "Well, Jim, it's not the first time someone has cried in my office. Many people have cried in this office, including me." More soft chuckling, followed by a brief, intimate silence, followed by me having a moment to regain my grounding as a man with ALS in a room full of people who know Mr. ALS all too well. The group moved on through our agenda, and we do have a meaningful partnership with the clinic. I'm learning that tears and ALS are pretty much kissing cousins. Fury, deep disappointment, grief, and heartbreak. This community, this ALS community, also weeps for the fearlessness, the dignity, and the brazen honesty of our kin. The road forward is a road through tears, holy tears of love and courage.
Beautiful, Jim. You've hit on so many important themes here. One was the importance of responsiveness and respect in humans, but especially healthcare providers. These are two of the big things I ask of everyone who works on my ALS team. The third one being optimism. And it might surprise you where I first learned the importance of those. It was on an ALS Untangled investigation. So as many of you may know, ALS Untangled is a program I started to help patients and families make more informed decisions about unusual treatments that appear on the internet, so people can submit ideas for things they're thinking of buying and trying. And then my team will investigate them and write short reviews. And the goal, again, is just to help them make more informed decisions. So I remember being at a chelation clinic in South Carolina and sitting in the waiting room where there were 3 people with ALS. And I said, tell me about your journey. Like, how did you wind up in this chelation clinic? And they all said the same thing. We went to a mainstream ALS clinic and it was just gloom and doom. And we'd leave a message and somebody may or may not get back to us. It would be days before we got our question answered. We'd come in with a couple of papers that we read about, things that we wanted to try that we knew were unusual. And they would usually just be dismissed in an insulting way. And there was just never any positivity. And the guy running that chelation clinic, the polar opposite. Just incredibly optimistic, incredibly respectful of people's ideas. I remember, one person said, I don't know if this chelation's working for me, but I did read that maybe Lyme disease causes ALS. And he said, I'll tell you what, we'll hook up another IV in your other arm. We'll give you some antibiotics for Lyme disease. Almost to an extreme of respective ideas. Like maybe there should be some discussion about whether that theory makes any sense or not. But certainly I would prefer that to just dismissing people in a paternalistic way when they have ideas. You highlighted the importance of just showing up. Howard couldn't fix your problems, but the mere fact that he was physically and emotionally present for you. And that's something that I never really understood the power of. And I try my best to do that for my patients now. Sometimes it's harder than others. You may have seen in the news that one of my patients recently completed a quest. She told me 6 years ago with ALS, she was going to try to do a marathon in all 50 states. And she asked if I would be there for the last one. And I said, of course, I'll be happy to. And the whole time thinking to myself, well, I hope she makes it. But if she makes it, the last one's probably going to be in North Carolina or one of the states that touches our borders. Nope. Turns out last May, she told me, come on over to Alaska. The last 50th marathon is going to be on Prince of Wales Island, which is like 3 plane rides, 4 boat rides, and a long van ride. I didn't even know if I was still in the United States anymore, but it was incredible. Just the connection that we all felt, all of us who made that trek. And then, lastly, you just hit on the themes of all the emotions that you felt as you were going through this process. And yeah, it's amazing how people process grief differently. And it's shown me the importance of recognizing and even embracing feelings in my patients, but also in myself. That's something I was not good at. I think a lot of doctors, to get to where they are and to be able to get through the day, to see the number of patients that we're being asked to see and deal with insurance companies. We have to kind of stuff our feelings sometimes, but I think it makes us less. I think it makes us less as doctors and less as human beings. Some colleagues have asked, how do you do this for this many years and not get burned out? And I say it's the connection. You would think it would be the opposite, that the only way to do this for this many years with this many patients is to disengage. No, I would have been gone a long time ago if I disengaged. I've cried with my patients. I felt their fear. I still get goosebumps thinking about this one patient's description of ALS. She said, it's like you put me in a box. Every day it gets a little smaller, further restricting what I can do. And one day I know it's going to get so small and tight that it's just going to suffocate me. And I've had nightmares about that analogy ever since she said that. I've been pissed off at this disease and I've used language I'm not proud of. Usually that happens when I'm talking to patients about insurance denials. But in the end, I feel like the whole thing has humbled me. And Jim, there's so many amazing things about you. I've only known you for a couple months, but you're not only so accomplished and so brilliant, but you're so humble. And as I look back over my own career, it's one of the things I'm the most proud of, the recognition by myself that I'm not a superhero. I'm a human being. I have feelings, I have frailties, but I also have skills. And when you really break it all down and you become humble, I think it makes you a better doctor, but I think it makes you a better person too.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So well put. And thank you for saying all that. And thank you for living it and doing it for all these patients, because it does make a difference. One thing I want to hear from you, because we mentioned this when we talked a little bit about this ahead of time, and we're almost out of time, but I do want this to think. I had a solo practice for 20 years, and people said to me, how How do you do that? You're on call every night for all your patients. You do house calls. How can you do that and not be burned out? And it's the same as you. It was the connection that I felt with the patients. I love my patients. My patients love me. I mean, when we were doctor-patient, I didn't use that language with them because I wanted to have appropriate professional boundaries. But I got so much back from that personal connection. And that's not why I did it, to feed my own ego or to feel good. But I'm saying that as I extended myself, as I was vulnerable to their experiences and their fears and their joys, it also fed me in a way. It gave me fulfillment as a clinician, as a doctor, and as something that I was able to contribute. And I wonder if that's also partly what you're saying here too, right? That it's not a one-way thing. It's bi-directional. And the language helps us in that, to be summative here. The language helps us to communicate that with each other.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I'm proud of all the things that I've been able to do for my patients over the last 23 years. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't fix or reverse ALS in any of them.
You still have time.
But I feel like I was able to recognize them and be present for them as human beings and cultivate, the best parts of them, and oftentimes see those grow. And in doing that, it just made me stronger and better and healthier too. So
you're more committed to carry on, I guess, right? Yeah. Exactly. Well, just one or two things to finish up here. I want to, let people know that the Plews-Ogans have some words that we're living by these days that we want to share. And that is, we keep it real, we say get involved, and we say show up. And, there are ways that people can join us in that through the Hummingbird Fund. Our website will launch next week, the hummingbird.fund.com, or our email is thehummingbirdfund@gmail.com. That's hummingbird.fund.va.com or the hummingbird.fund@gmail.com. And you can join us again for the virtual Haney conference, where I Am ALS panel, Tim Lowry panel, will also be a part of that on March 2nd. Justin, I think we're ready for questions.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to invite our participants on Zoom. Please feel free to enter any questions you might have in the Q&A tab. A couple have come in already. One of them, more of a comment, just a shout out about the TLS scoring idea being the, quote, the best thing that I've heard in a year. And I want to sort of piggyback off of that. And Jim, one of the things that I noticed in that particular blog post, in terms of the language that you chose, is you used the word parallel. Like, we need a scoring system that's in parallel to this other system. And I think sometimes we, when we're trying to understand how best to talk to one another in the world of medicine, sometimes our languages can be antagonistic to one another. And I was really taken by that. How, for both of you, how would you say how do we cultivate languages in parallel? Because of course we can't, and we typically don't give up our sort of biomedical language that is always going to be there. How do we cultivate sort of a both and mentality, both at the interpersonal level with clinicians and patients, but also I would say at the systems level? We all work in systems, some of which are quite large, and very much condition the languages that we use with one another. So what would you say about how best to cultivate that?
You want to start, Jim?
No, I'd like you to.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a challenge. And, part of the challenge comes from the way the American health system is evolving. I mean, I'm at a point in my career now, and I'm at a place where I can spend as much time with people as I want. And so, this business of trying to really understand who they are, not just understand, what they can do from a strength standpoint. I have the luxury of time to do that, but, many of my colleagues don't. And so, I don't know how we turn back the clock to a day when we could spend the time that we wanted to spend with patients, but I think that's one thing that has to change. I mean, in the meantime, another thing that could change is just, on multidisciplinary ALS teams, it's recognized that that's really the best way to take care of people with this disease, to create a team where the doctor is just one of many different people that are going to see the patient. There could be someone on the team, maybe a social worker or a psychologist, someone who focuses on the cultivation of that other part of the person, not just, the arm and leg muscles, the speaking and swallowing functions, the breathing. Someone is focused on what's inside and cultivating the spirit.
I think that's really true. The multi-D clinic is really key, and picking up different things from different people, and interacting as a team, I think, and people see things in different ways, especially something so complicated as ALS. I think two things, Justin. One is I was thinking parallel because my wife Peggy is a wisdom scholar, and she studies post-traumatic growth. And it's been shown that people have choices, as they move through trauma or, challenges. And part of that, the positive outcome that can come from that, has to do with stepping into it, accepting things. There's a number of things. And so I think tracking that, along with the decline in physical function, being able to track something that moves forward in a positive way, sort of in tandem, could be very interesting, I guess, to me, for a number of reasons, scholarly and otherwise. I have finished the ALS TLS. It'll drop in the blog. Soon the blog's being converted over to the website. So it'll be the first post when the website goes live. The other thing I want to say is that, and Dr. Bedlack could talk more about this than I probably around ALS, but it's a tricky thing, right? Because not everybody moves through this in the same way. And the last thing any of us would want to do is have someone feel like they weren't progressing along in the ALS TLS, and in a way, and it would be a negative for them. So my hope would be just that, it could be just even elevating the topics, maybe could be something that would be interesting. It would be a place to start the conversation. It would be a story starter, if you will. It would give the beginnings of language to things that are so often unseen. Similarly, in the land of ALS, caregivers are unnoticed as the progression moves on. Everybody with ALS ends up with a complete disability, and someone is taking care of them. And those people that are taking care of them are by and large their families, and often those people are missed, and the language of their experience also needs to be shared. I think I'd like to use the ALS TLS as a family thing, because I think that it's not just the person themselves, but it's the people around them. It's that army that Dr. Bedlack mentioned. Those people are getting something out of being a part of that guy's army, and was going to change them for the positive in some way. Not to say that ALS is a good thing because it leads to, altruism, but just that these things are there. And wisdom is a situation where you can see everything together. And I don't know, that's my thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I think this next question sort of very much connects with those comments. And it's sort of almost a meta question about all this bidirectionality and parallel language, which is that there's another parallel language that we often use, and that's mood, spirit, body, this kind of dualism. And the questioner wants to know, knowing that the bodily experience is so interconnected with mood and spirit, could you both talk a little bit about the relationship between body and spirit, and how the spirit reacts to the body changing, or vice versa?
Wow.
You want me to start, Jim?
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic question, and I would say there's a lot to unpack. I mean, as I mentioned, it can be very challenging for people to disconnect the two parts of their body. Like, so many people in the beginning are so tied to what they can do. Like, their identity is, like I asked Jim, the identity could be tied up in being left-handed, and now you're not left-handed anymore. So how do you find a new identity? But I think a lot of people can learn to do this. I think having a scale like the one that Jim invented in the clinic would actually maybe help them to refocus and understand that these two things don't need to be tied to each other, that even as the body goes down, the spirit doesn't have to, the spirit can soar. The other side of it that I just want to comment on is that I do think people who are more positive do better. And it's really hard to say that one causes the other, which came first, the chicken or the egg. But so often I get asked about this group of people that appear to have recovered from ALS, 60 of them now that I have records on from all over the world. And what's different about them? Well, I haven't found the one thing that they all have in common yet, except the fact that these are almost all the most positive people I've ever talked to. Now, did that cause their ALS to reverse, or was it that they weren't positive until they got diagnosed with ALS and unexpectedly recovered from it? I don't know, but I do think that there are examples in other fields where a positive attitude makes a huge difference in terms of the progression of an illness.
Yeah, that's really a good point. I mean, I think the mind, the body, and the soul, personally, are manifestations of the same thing. So they all relate to one another. And as my body becomes less functional, it definitely relates to my mood, certain days more than others, and my spiritual well-being. I have a daily practice of contemplation. So I'm inviting this to help inform me for a positive, growthful thing. I'm inviting these changes that are happening to me to be the reality of my life, and to step into that as the reality of my life and to continue on living to the fullest. And that means through and with these disabilities and limitations. And it's life. So I would say that as I've had declines, I learned from Dr. Bedlack, they don't come necessarily as a straight line. They're like plateaus, and you have dips and sometimes recoveries and whatever. Thank you for that, by the way. And when I've had declines, it's harder. I mean, it's harder just to function, but it's harder to maintain this will to grow in the midst of all of this. But I have a wonderful family and terrific friends and a wonderful church community. And, the Hummingbird Fund has been really wonderful. I have great care at the University of Virginia. So I have a good life, actually.
Well, thanks to you both. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but really appreciate both of you, as well as all of our participants, and opening up this discussion with us today. I know that there's a lot more to discuss, and as we always say with Medical Center Hour, please continue this conversation in your own groups that you care about, your own families, your own coworkers, etc. Please join us next week, same time, same Zoom link, for a presentation of global resonance on the past, present, and future of patient safety and quality. Our 2023 Jesse Stewart Richardson Memorial Lecture will feature Dr. Trish Greenhalgh from the University of Oxford in the UK. Dr. Greenhalgh is a leading international expert in the translation of evidence-based medicine into clinical practice, and will deliver a lecture entitled Something in the Air, Hospital Infection Control Policies and the Crisis of Evidence-Based Medicine. Thanks to everyone, and we hope to see you next week.